Hello everyone, I'm Vincent from Musundu Free English. Thanks for clicking, and welcome to this lesson on relative clauses. In this video I will break down everything you need to know in a simple way. Relative clauses. A. Defining and non-defining clauses. A defining or identifying clause is a clause which tells us which person or thing we're talking about. This kind of clause could often be information included in brackets. A non-defining, or non-essential clause, is a clause which gives us more information about the person or thing we're talking about. Example, the welder, his name was George, sold us some windows. Equals of the welder, whose name was George, sold us some windows. It's important to see the difference between the two types of clause, as it affects, 1. The choice of pronouns used to introduce the clause. 2. The punctuation. You must use commas with a non-defining clause. B. How to form a relative clause. Relative clause, as the name suggests, these clauses give essential information to define or identify the person or thing we're talking about. Obviously, this is only necessary if there's more than one person or things involved. Example, rats that like cats are very unusual. In this sentence we understand that there are many rats, but it's clear that we're only talking about the ones that like cats. Punctuation, commas are not used in defining relative clauses. Relative pronouns. The following relative pronouns are used in defining relative clauses: subject, who/that. Object, who/whom/that. Possessive, whose. Notes. The relative pronoun stands in a place of a noun. This noun usually appears earlier in the sentence. Example, the lady, noun, subject of the main clause, who/that, relative pronoun referring to the lady, subject of spoke at the meeting, verb plus rest of relative clause, was very knowledgeable, verb plus rest of main clause. Who, whom and which can be replaced by that. This is very common in spoken English. The relative pronoun can be omitted when it's the object of the clause. Example, the lady, noun, subject of the main clause, that, relative pronoun, referring to the ladies, object of loved, the man loved, verb plus rest of relative clause, was living in Kampala, verb plus rest of main clause. You can usually decide whether a relative pronoun is an object because it's normally followed by another subject plus verb. Whose is a possessive pronoun used to refer to ownership. Whose is used for things as well as for people. Examples, the woman whose bag was stolen. A branch whose leaves have fallen. Whom is very formal and is only used in written English. You can use who/that, or omit the pronoun completely. The teacher whom/who/that I was hoping to see wasn't on duty. That normally follows words like something, anything, everything, nothing, all and superlatives. We use that for both a person and anything/idea. Examples, I'm talking about the person that I saw last night. This is the method that I want to use. When who is the object, whom, with a preposition, can be used instead, but it's formal and rather old-fashioned. In modern speech, we use who, or we leave out the pronoun. Example, you're referring to a person who no longer lives here. Equals of the person to whom you're referring no longer lives here. Equals of the person, who, you're referring to no longer lives here. Where, relative adverb, refers to places and locations. Where is the bus please? That's where I was born. More examples, there's something that you should tell her. It was the best movie that I've ever seen. A comedian is someone who makes you laugh. A camel is an animal that lives in hot countries. The apples that were in the fridge were delicious. I've eaten them. Where are the apples that I put in the fridge? Has anyone seen the newspaper I was reading? Nothing that anyone does can replace my lost book. Let's go to a city where the sun always shines. They stay in the house whose roof is full of holes. I know a lady. She speaks 6 languages. Equals, I know a lady who speaks 6 languages. I know a lady. Her man speaks 6 languages. Equals, know a lady whose man speaks 6 languages. I spoke to a person last night. Equals of the person to whom I spoke last night, formal. Equals of the person, who, I spoke to last night, informal. I live in a hostel. It's 150 years old. Equals, I live in a hostel which slash that is 150 years old. That's the hotel. We stayed there last month. Equals of that's the hotel where we stayed last month. Equals of that's the hotel that we stayed in last month. C. Placing the preposition in a relative clause. There are often prepositions in a relative clause, and the relative pronoun is the object of the preposition. This means that the preposition can sometimes be omitted. The preposition is normally placed at the end of the relative clause, except for without. Examples, is that the lady, who, you arrived with? That's the lady without whom we'll get lost. Not. The lady whom we'll get lost without. Do you know the woman, that, Stephen is talking to? In formal or written English, the preposition is often placed between the relative pronoun, and in this case the pronoun cannot be omitted. The person with whom he's negotiating is the CEO of a large company. It's a company to which many influential people belong. However, this is unusual in spoken English. More examples. The forest the tribe lived in was full of strange and unusual animals. She liked the children that she lived with. The shade under which they had their picnic was the largest and oldest in the park. To the east of the city was a park that many children went to on the weekend. It was the lake in which the people preferred to swim. The preposition is not placed before who/that. Example, the lady who/that Jeffrey is talking to is Dr. Amina. Not, the lady to who/that Jeffrey is talking to is Dr. Amina. The preposition is not placed before the relative pronoun when it's part of the phrasal verb. Examples, this is the pen that I'm looking for. That's a kid whom you should look after. D. Non-defining relative clauses. The information in these clauses is not essential. It tells us more about someone or something, but it does not help us to identify them or it. Compare, rats that like cats are very unusual. This tells us which rats we're talking about. Elephants, which are large and originate in Africa, can sometimes be found in zoos. This gives us some extra information about elephants. We are talking about all elephants, not just one type or group. Alex's mother, who lives in Burundi, has 6 grandchildren. We know who Alex's mother is, and he only has 1. The important information is the number of grandchildren, but the fact that she lives in Burundi might be followed with the words by the way. It's additional information. Punctuation. Non-defining relative clauses are always separated from the rest of the sentence by commas. The commas have a similar function to brackets. Examples, my friend Silas has just written a best-selling novel, he went to the same college as me. Equals, my friend Silas, who went to the same college as me, has just written a best-selling novel. Relative pronouns in non-defining clauses. Person, thing, place. Subject, who, which, where. Object, who/whom, which, where. Possessive, whose, which, where. Notes, in non-defining clauses, you cannot use that instead of who, whom or which. You cannot leave out the relative pronoun, even when it's the object of the verb in the relative clause. Examples, she gave me the paper, which was in a brown envelope. Cannot remove the which. He gave me the newspaper, which I read immediately. You cannot remove the which. The preposition in these clauses can go at the end of the clause, e.g. This is Mount Kenya, which you have all heard about. This pattern is often used in spoken English, but in written or formal English you can also put the preposition before the pronoun, e.g., Mount Kenya, about which many people have written, is Hassan's birthplace. Non-defining clauses can be introduced by expressions like all of, many of plus relative pronoun. Thing versus person. A few of which, a few of whom. Any of which, any of whom. All of which, all of whom. Both of which, both of whom. Each of which, each of whom. Either of which, either of whom. half of which, half of whom. Many of which, many of whom. Most of which, most of whom. Much of which, much of whom. None of which, none of whom. One of which, one of whom. Two of which, two of whom. Etc. Examples: there were a lot of students at the concert, many of whom I had known for years. She was carrying her glasses, many of which were broken. The relative pronoun which at the beginning of a non-defining relative clause, can refer to all the information contained in the previous part of the sentence, rather than to just one word. Jane did well in her exams, which was a big surprise. The fact that she did well in her exams was a big surprise. A socialist and a conservative supported the new law, which is most unusual. Equals the fact that they supported is unusual. More examples. My uncle, who's dead now, came from the United States. He spoke to Brian, who explained the problem. The lady looked at the shade, under which she had often sat. We stopped at the stadium, which we had never been into. He's studying physics, which many people hate. I've just met Crispin, whose wife works in Lagos. She had thousands of novels, most of which she had read. When can we leave out relative pronouns, who, whom, which, that? In conversational English, relative pronouns can be omitted when they are the object of a relative clause. In a formal context, it's usually wiser to leave the relative pronoun, example, Charles, subject, drives, verb, a blue car, object. Equals of the person who drives a blue car is called Charles. In this sentence, who refers to the subject, so it cannot be omitted. The car that Charles drives is blue. In this sentence, that refers to the object, the car, so it can be omitted. Compare, the man who wanted to see me is a teacher. Man is the subject of the sentence. The man that I wanted to see is a teacher. Here, man is the object, I is the subject. When to use that in relative clause. 1. That is used to replace who, whom, which in defining relative clauses, example, the teacher whom/that I was hoping to see wasn't on duty. 2. After superlatives, example, she was the most interesting person that I've ever met. 3. After only, the first, the second, the last, example, it was the second time that I heard of it. 4. After noun phrase composed of person and object, example, he talked about the animals and places that he had visited. 5. After indefinite pronouns, quantity pronouns, someone, something, anyone, anything, no one, nothing, all, some, any, little. Example, these novels are all that my brother left me. Notes. We cannot use that in non-defining relative clauses. We cannot use that after preposition. F. Reduced relative clauses. A relative clause is a type of subordinate clause introduced by a relative pronoun. What is the name of that girl who just walked in? Here the clause, who just walked in, is an example of a relative clause, it modifies the noun girl. Relative clauses are also called the adjective clauses. Relative clauses are sometimes shortened. How to reduce a relative clause. A participle can often be used instead of a relative pronoun and full verb. Example, the boy who sits next to Raphael is my neighbor's son. Now when we shorten the relative clause, who sits next to Raphael, we get, the boy sitting next to Raphael is my neighbor's son. Another example is given below. Who's the boy that's sitting next to your sister? Now when we reduce the relative clause we get, who's the boy sitting next to your sister? More examples are given below. A boy who works at a restaurant has won a lottery. Equals, a boy working at a restaurant has won a lottery. The man who lives next door throws numerous parties. Equals, the man living next door throws numerous parties. Yesterday I read a novel which was written by Charles. Equals, yesterday I read a novel written by Charles. Most students who were invited to the party didn't turn up. Equals, most students invited to the party didn't turn up. Anyone who enters the stadium without permission will be punished. Equals, anyone entering the stadium without permission will be punished. Reduced structures can also be used with the adjectives available and possible. Kindly book all the tickets available, equals kindly book all the tickets that are available. You may remove the relative pronoun and reduce your sentence in certain conditions. Example, the student who wants to talk to you is waiting for you. Equals of the student wanting to talk to you is waiting for you. Relative clause reduction rules. 1. In defining clauses, we can omit the relative pronoun in the position of object. The student whom that you don't like much wants to talk to you. Equals of the student you don't like much wants to talk to you. NB, in non-defining sentences you neither omit the relative pronoun nor use that. Example, my sister, whom you met yesterday, wants to talk to you. Incorrect, my sister you met yesterday. 2. We can use participles when reducing the sentence. Present participle vengi, simultaneous. They stood on the bridge which connects the two halves of the town. Equals of they stood on the bridge connecting the two halves of the town, present participle. Past participle V3 or being V3, passive simultaneous. The child who was attacked by a cat was taken to hospital. Equals of the child attacked by a cat was taken to hospital, past participle, perfect participle having V3. Active, explaining something happened before the others, e.g., the student who has asked a question is very clever. Equals of the student having asked a question is very clever, perfect participle. Perfect passive participle having been V3, passive, explaining something happened before others. The man who has been asked a question is very clever. Equals of the man having been asked a question is very clever, perfect passive participle. 3. If to be verb is used after a relative pronoun we can omit relative pronoun plus to be. Examples, the bicycle which is parked next to mine is very expensive. Equals of the bicycle parked next to mine is very expensive. 4. When the verb have meaning possession, we can omit relative pronoun and have and use with plus or without, e.g., pupils who have enough knowledge and skills will be admitted. Equals to pupils with enough knowledge and skills will be admitted. Men who don't have their ID cards cannot get in. Equals men without their ID cards cannot get in. 5. We can use infinitive, to, in the cases below. The only, to. Superlative, to. The first, last, second, next, to. Examples, Emmanuel is the only person who understands me. Equals, Emmanuel is the only person to understand me. Robert is the most handsome boy who came in this school. Equals, Robert is the most handsome boy to come in this school. Remy is the first person who has handed in this exam. Equals, Remy is the first person to have handed in this exam. Thank you for watching. Kindly subscribe for more grammar tips and lessons. Good luck and keep practicing.